The dismissed warning. The massive council room was filled with the low hum of chatter as the alien leaders gathered around a long, polished table. At the head of the table sat Commander Zorin, a young but ambitious officer from the Galactic Empire. His green skin shimmered under the room's artificial lights, and his eyes glowed with the fierce confidence that came from years of conquest. The council was convened to discuss a single important matter: the upcoming invasion of Earth. "Earth is weak," Zorin declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Our scouts report primitive technology and poor defenses. We'll crush them in hours." The room erupted in agreement. The Galactic Empire had conquered dozens of planets across the galaxy, and Earth was just another challenge to be swept aside. The alien leaders had no reason to doubt Zorin's assessment. The humans had little experience in intergalactic warfare, and their planet was isolated, perfect for the taking. But then, a flicker of doubt broke through the chatter. An older, more seasoned officer, General Vrex, stood up. His pale skin was lined with wrinkles, a testament to his many years in the military. His voice, though softer than Zorin's, carried the weight of experience. "I don't know," Vrex said, his voice betraying concern. "I heard rumors of something. A force we've never faced before." Zorin raised an eyebrow. "Rumors? What are you suggesting, General?" Vrex leaned forward, his eyes scanning the room. "I've received a report from a trusted source, an intercepted transmission from Earth itself. It warns us, says their warships are unlike anything we've encountered. They claim they are stronger than anything we've seen in the galaxy." The room went silent. Zorin's expression remained unchanged, though the silence was enough to make him pause. It was hard for him to believe such a claim. The Galactic Empire had never lost a battle, and their technology was superior to any race in the galaxy. "Do you believe this?" Zorin asked, his tone sharp. Vrex nodded. "I'm not sure, but the warning is clear. Human warships are a deadly force. They urge us to reconsider." Zorin snorted, dismissing the general's concerns with a flick of his hand. "Deadly force? From humans? They can barely send a man to the moon, and you're telling me their warships are a threat?" The other leaders chuckled, some even shaking their heads. The idea of human warships being a serious threat seemed laughable. The Galactic Empire had faced the most powerful species in the universe, and none had stood a chance. How could these so-called humans, primitive creatures with no understanding of true power, possibly be a match for them? "General, I respect your experience," Zorin said, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "But I think you've let these rumors cloud your judgment. The Galactic Empire has never been defeated, and I intend to keep it that way. We will conquer Earth, just as we've conquered every other planet." With that, Zorin turned his attention back to the council. "I suggest we proceed with our plans. The fleet is ready. We'll invade Earth, and within hours, we'll wipe out any resistance." A murmur of agreement swept through the room. The decision was made, and the alien leaders moved on to the next phase of their discussion. But in the back of the room, General Vrex's mind raced. He could not shake the feeling that they were making a grave mistake. As the meeting came to an end, Zorin dismissed everyone, his voice full of authority. "Prepare for the invasion. It will be swift and decisive." The council members left the room, but Vrex remained behind, his thoughts heavy. He couldn't ignore the warning any longer. He had to act. Despite the council's dismissal, he knew that something was different about this mission. The humans might be more dangerous than anyone realized. Vrex stood up and walked to the far side of the room, where a communications console was hidden away in a corner. He hesitated for a moment before dialing a secure line. His fingers trembled slightly as he entered the coordinates for the Earth transmission. He needed to know more. The humans had to be taken seriously. He couldn't ignore the warning. The screen flickered to life, and a voice crackled through the static. It was an old Earth broadcast, filled with static and distorted by the years. But Vrex could still make out the words. "This is your final warning," the voice said. "Human warships are not what they seem. If you choose to ignore this message, you will pay the price. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Vrex stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He was not sure what to believe, but one thing was clear: the humans had something they were not sharing. And if they were as deadly as the transmission suggested, the Krillian Empire might be in for a shock. The warning had been dismissed, but in the quiet of the room, General Vrex couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were not to be underestimated. He turned away from the console, a sense of dread settling over him. It was too late to turn back now, but the young Commander Zorin had made a dangerous mistake, and soon the galaxy would learn that underestimating Earth could be the last mistake anyone made. The fleet approaches Earth. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before Commander Zorin and his fleet as they made their way toward Earth. The Krillian warships gleamed under the distant light of the stars, their sleek forms designed for speed and destruction. Zorin stood at the helm of the flagship, his eyes scanning the empty void before him. He felt a thrill run through him. This would be another glorious conquest, another feather in his cap. The fear and uncertainty that had flickered in his mind during the council meeting were long gone, replaced by a fierce confidence. The human warning was nothing but a laughable distraction. They were no match for the Krillian war machines. As the fleet neared the outskirts of Earth's solar system, Zorin gave the order to enter the atmosphere. He had no intention of waiting any longer. Earth's defenses would crumble beneath the might of the Krillian Empire, just as they always did. All ships, prepare to engage, Zorin commanded. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of excitement in it. Today, we make history. Earth's fall will be swift. Across the fleet, alien officers prepared their warships. They adjusted the power levels of their weapons, calibrated their energy shields, and monitored every system. For the soldiers aboard, it was a routine operation. They had conquered entire star systems before. Earth was no different. On Earth, however, things were far from routine. Across the globe, governments and military leaders were on high alert. The transmissions from General Vrex had not been enough to stop the invasion, but they had shaken humanity. Although the aliens had dismissed the warning, humans knew they had to be ready for anything. The most powerful warships in Earth's history had been constructed in secret, hidden beneath layers of rock and metal on the moon. Designed by the best minds from across the planet, these ships were more advanced than anyone had imagined. The humans had not been idle while the aliens thought them weak. They had prepared. In a secret underground facility, Earth's leaders watched the progress of the alien fleet as it entered the solar system. Their eyes were filled with a mix of fear and determination. They had one chance to prove humanity's strength, and it was coming now. Activate the warships, General Carter, the leader of Earth's defense operations, commanded. His voice was steady, but there was an underlying tension. If the aliens were right about their superiority, this could be the last stand for humanity. At the far side of the moon, the massive warships, each one larger than any human vessel, came to life. They had been dormant for years, waiting for this very moment. As they powered up, their energy shields shimmered into existence, and their enormous weapon systems began to hum with power. "What's the status of the Krillian fleet?" General Carter asked, his eyes fixed on the monitors in front of him. "Approaching fast. They'll be in range within the hour," an officer replied, her voice strained with anxiety. "They're not slowing down." On Zorin's flagship, the final leg of their journey to Earth felt like an eternity. The alien commander couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had dismissed the warnings about humanity's warships, but as they neared Earth's orbit, a strange unease settled over him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but the quiet, peaceful planet below didn't seem so innocent anymore. "Are we ready for the first strike?" Zorin asked, his voice unwavering. "Yes, Commander," came the response from his tactical officer. "We're locking onto Earth's main cities and military sites now. Our weapon systems are primed and ready." "Good," Zorin said, a smile creeping across his face. "Fire the first salvo." The alien fleet's weapons unleashed a deadly barrage of energy missiles, lighting up space as they rocketed toward Earth's surface. Zoran's fleet was fast, and they had the element of surprise, or so they thought. What they didn't expect was the sudden flash of light that appeared just outside Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't a missile nor a ship, it was something much bigger. The human warships had emerged from behind the moon, their massive forms cutting through the darkness like predators stalking their prey. The fleet was enormous, vast, unyielding, and filled with a kind of power that Zoran had never seen before. The first ship in the fleet, a colossal behemoth of metal and energy, glowed with an eerie light. Its weapon systems activated with a hum that sent a chill down Zoran's spine. "What is that?" Zoran muttered under his breath as he watched the human ships take formation. They had emerged from nowhere, and the sheer size of them made his heart race. They were not like any ships he had encountered. They were bigger than anything his fleet had, with weapon systems he couldn't even comprehend. They had hidden their strength, waiting for the perfect moment. In that moment, the aliens realized the full weight of the mistake they had made. They had underestimated humanity's potential, believing the humans to be too weak to resist. But now, as the human warships locked onto their position, Zoran's confidence began to crack. "Bring the shields up," Zoran ordered urgently. His hands clenched into fists as the human fleet began its approach. They weren't backing down. They weren't running. The first shot from the human warships was unlike anything Zoran had ever seen. A beam of pure energy shot out from one of the warships, so powerful that it cut through the void of space with a terrifying roar. It struck one of the Krillian ships, disintegrating it in an instant. There was no explosion, no debris, just the ship gone. Zoran's eyes widened in disbelief. This is impossible. The battle had begun, and humanity's deadly force had been unleashed. The invaders were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The first battle. The sound of blaring alarms echoed through the corridors of Zoran's flagship, its once proud metallic hum now filled with the panicked clamor of battle stations being activated. Zoran's chest tightened as he stared at the view screen, watching in horror as the human warship fired again. A blinding beam of light tore through the darkness, and another Krillian ship vanished into nothingness. The loss of two ships in an instant was almost unimaginable. For the first time, Zoran began to understand the reality of the situation. "This can't be happening," Zoran muttered under his breath, his mind racing. The humans were supposed to be weak, easy prey, nothing like the seasoned warriors they have faced in the past. Yet here they were, their weapons tearing through the Krillian fleet with terrifying precision. Zoran quickly composed himself. His fleet was powerful, and he wasn't going to let this be the end of the Galactic Empire's undefeated record. He turned to his tactical officer, his voice sharp. "Counterattack. Focus all fire on that human flagship. It must be the source of their power," Zoran ordered. The officer hesitated for a fraction of a second, but then nodded, quickly relaying the command to the rest of the fleet. The Krillian ships shifted positions, their weapons charging as they turned toward the human flagship. A barrage of energy blasts erupted from the Krillian warships, their beams cutting through space toward their target. But the humans were prepared. The human flagship's shields flared to life, glowing with an almost unnatural brilliance as the Krillian shots bounced off harmlessly. It was as if the human ships were made of something far stronger than the alien fleets had ever encountered. Zoran's mind raced. How could they have built something so advanced in such a short time? Were these truly human warships? The flagship's massive cannons, built into the very core of the ship, began to charge. Zoran watched, mesmerized, as the massive ship pivoted slowly, preparing to return fire. The Krillian fleet had always been the aggressors. Now, for the first time, they were on the defensive. "All ships, scatter," Zoran shouted, realizing that standing still would be their demise. "Evade. Keep moving." It was too late. The human flagship fired once more, and this time, It was as if time itself had slowed. The energy beam shot forward, moving faster than any Krillian ship could dodge. With a deafening roar, it struck the lead Krillian ship. The energy hit with such force that the entire vessel disintegrated into a flash of light. Its crew vaporized instantly. The remains of the ship scattered like dust in space. Zoran's hands tightened on the console in front of him as he watched his fleet get torn apart. The human warships were relentless, each shot precise, each movement calculated. The Krillians were not prepared for this level of warfare. "Commander, we can't keep up," cried his weapons officer, panic creeping into his voice. "They're outmatching us at every turn." Zoran's mind raced. The battle wasn't going the way he had planned. His fleet had been the strongest in the galaxy, but against these human warships, they seemed like toys. He glanced at his remaining ships, fewer now, as more and more were destroyed with each passing second. He had underestimated Earth, and now he had to find a way out, or they would all be destroyed. "Commander, the human warships are focusing on us," another officer yelled, pointing to the view screen. "They're taking down our communications relay, our shield generators. They are systematically disabling us." The truth hit Zoran like a punch to the gut. The humans were not just fighting back, they were dismantling his fleet piece by piece. It was like they knew exactly where to strike, exploiting weaknesses he had never imagined. He quickly issued another order. "All ships, retreat. Fall back to the outer edges of the system. Regroup and re-strategize." The Krillian fleet began to turn, retreating in disarray. But as they tried to escape, the human ships pursued, not allowing them a moment's respite. A second barrage came, and another Krillian ship vanished in a flash of brilliant energy. Zoran's eyes widened as his fleet's numbers dwindled even further. The human fleet didn't hesitate. They moved with precision, cutting off escape routes, their warships encircling the remaining Krillian ships. There was no safe place to retreat to, no corner of space to hide. The humans had them surrounded. "Commander, we need to call for reinforcements, or we will be destroyed," an officer said, his voice shaking with fear. "We can't do this alone." Zoran felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. It was too late for reinforcements. They would never arrive in time. The Krillian fleet was being decimated. His fleet was no longer a formidable force. It was running for its life. He turned to his comms officer. "Send a message to the fleet. Full retreat to the edge of the system. We'll regroup there." But before the officer could respond, a loud, rattling shockwave shook the entire flagship. The human ships had fired again, and this time, the shot hit closer to home. The flagship's shields began to flicker and crack under the strain. Zoran's teeth clenched as the ship's integrity began to fail. "Get those shields back online," Zoran barked. "We are not going to lose here." But deep down, Zoran knew. The battle was already lost. The human warships were simply too powerful, their tactics too advanced. The Krillians, despite their technological prowess and arrogance, had failed to account for one thing: humanity's capacity to surprise, to adapt, and to fight with everything they had. As the last remaining Krillian ships limped toward the edge of the system, the human fleet followed, relentless in their pursuit. Zoran could see it now. The humans were not just defending their planet. They were making a statement. Earth was not to be conquered. And soon Zoran and his fleet would be forced to learn the hard way that humanity was not a race to be underestimated. The human warships had shown their power, and the battle was far from over. The surprise power of human warships. The vast emptiness of space was suddenly filled with a deafening silence, broken only by the strained hum of Zoran's flagship as it limped away from the devastating battle. His fleet had been shattered, broken into pieces. The Krillian commander could only stare at the view screen in disbelief. The human warships, once seen as a mere nuisance, had proven to be more than a challenge. They were an unstoppable force. Zoran gritted his teeth. His confidence, once unshakable, had now been shattered just like the remnants of his fleet. He had never imagined that humanity, a species he believed to be primitive and weak, could possess such devastating power. These humans were not just resilient, they were cunning, resourceful, and deadly. It was clear now that underestimating them was the gravest mistake of his life. Report. Zoran snapped at his officers, his voice tight with frustration. What's our status? One of the bridge officers, his face pale with fear, quickly turned from his console. Shields are down to 20%, Commander. We've lost communication with the rest of the fleet. The damage is extensive. Our engines are barely functioning. Zoran slammed his fist against the armrest. We can't afford to be sitting targets. Get the engines online. We need to move. Sir, the human fleet is still following us, another officer said. They're not stopping. They're closing in fast. It's only a matter of time before we're trapped. Zoran's eyes flicked to the view screen. Sure enough, the human warships were relentless, their massive forms growing larger with each passing moment. Unlike the Krillian fleet, which had been designed for speed and quick strikes, these human warships were massive, their hulls brimming with power. They had the size, the firepower, and the determination to finish what they had started. But Zoran wasn't ready to give up yet. He was a commander, a leader of the Galactic Empire, and he wasn't about to let his reputation be destroyed by a bunch of humans. His mind raced, quickly formulating a plan. There had to be a way to escape. There had to be a weakness. Prepare to engage our emergency warp drives, he ordered, trying to mask the desperation in his voice. We need to jump out of this system. As soon as we reach the outer edges, we'll make a break for it. But just as he issued the order, the ship shook violently. A sharp screech of metal filled the air, and Zoran's heart skipped a beat. The human warships had made their move again. A pulse of energy surged toward his flagship, and for a split second, Zoran thought they were finished. But then something incredible happened. The energy pulse hit the flagship's shields, and instead of shattering them, something unexpected occurred. The energy pulse ricocheted off the shields, sending a ripple through the human fleet. The human warships, massive as they were, appeared to stagger, their weapons momentarily disrupted. Zoran's eyes widened as he realized what had happened. They're not just attacking us. They're attacking the very fabric of space. Zoran said aloud, shocked by the sudden realization. The humans had weaponized the very forces that controlled the battlefield. It was no longer just about firepower. They were manipulating the laws of physics itself. Get the energy readings from their ships, Zoran barked. His mind was still racing, trying to process the new threat. What just happened? A technician quickly ran a scan. Commander, they've activated some kind of gravitational weapon. It interferes with the space-time continuum, disrupting our shields and systems. I've never seen anything like it. Zoran's grip tightened around the console. It wasn't just the size or the firepower of the human ships that made them dangerous. It was the sheer unpredictability of their tactics. The humans were not only physically superior, they had mastered weapons that bent the rules of the universe itself. We need to regroup. Now, Zoran shouted, turning toward his tactical officer. Initiate a full retreat. Get us out of their range. But as the Krillian fleet tried to retreat once again, a new wave of human firepower erupted. The human warships weren't just attacking, they were closing in, surrounding Zoran's ship with deadly precision. The Krillians were outclassed at every turn. No matter which direction they tried to move in, the human ships were already there, their weapons charging for another strike. This is it, Commander, a voice from the back of the bridge called out, the fear palpable in the officer's tone. They've trapped us. We're running out of options. Zoran's mind was a whirl of confusion and anger. Every move his fleet made was anticipated. The human warships had anticipated their every counterattack. The truth hit him like a punch to the stomach. The humans were not simply fighting for survival. They had been waiting for this moment. They had planned for this war long before Zoran's fleet had even thought of Earth. As his ship struggled to evade the human onslaught, Zorin caught a glimpse of something that sent a shiver down his spine. The human flagship, now close enough to touch, revealed its full firepower. The massive ship seemed to pulse with an energy that seemed to draw the very light of the stars into it. A massive cannon, far larger than anything the Krillians had, began to charge. Zorin could feel the heat of the weapon even through his ship's reinforced shields. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The human fleet wasn't just advancing, they were setting the stage for a final catastrophic blow. "Brace yourselves," Zorin shouted, knowing that the end was near. The entire ship vibrated as the human weapon powered up, and for the first time, Zorin wondered if he had made the last mistake of his life. And then it happened. A beam of pure energy, the likes of which Zorin had never seen, shot out from the human flagship. It collided with his ship's weakened shields, and in an instant, the shields shattered. The blast tore through the Krillian vessel, disintegrating everything in its path. The command deck, the engines, the weapon systems, all were consumed in an instant. Zorin barely had time to react as his world crumbled around him. He saw his fleet in chaos, ships disintegrating under the overwhelming firepower. For the first time since the beginning of the invasion, Zorin realized the truth. The humans had not just beaten them, they had overwhelmed them in every way possible. In the face of such power, the Krillian Empire's might was nothing. The humans had shown him a new kind of war, and now he was learning the hard way that no one, no matter how powerful, was invincible. The turning point. The aftermath of the blast was chaos. Zorin's flagship, once a symbol of Krillian might, was now a twisted, burning wreck. The superheated metal of the hull groaned as it bent under the weight of the destruction. Sparks flew from the control panels, and alarms blared, filling the bridge with an overwhelming cacophony. Zorin gripped the edge of the captain's console, his knuckles turning white as he struggled to maintain his balance. He couldn't believe it. The humans had done it. In a single strike, they had torn through his flagship's defenses like tissue paper. The sheer power of their weapons had made his fleet's technology seem outdated, even obsolete. And now, as the bridge began to fill with smoke and the crew scrambled to manage the damage, Zorin realized the unimaginable truth. His fleet was on the verge of total annihilation. "We've lost control of the ship," a panicked officer shouted from the communications console. "Our propulsion systems are offline. We can't move." Zorin felt his heart race, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. He knew this was the moment that would define everything. He had underestimated the humans, and now the consequences were staring him in the face. "Status of the remaining fleet," Zorin barked, trying to regain some semblance of authority. Another officer, eyes wide with panic, glanced at his screen. "Sir, the rest of the fleet is in full retreat. Most of them have taken critical damage. Only 5 ships are still operational, and they're barely holding on." Zorin's mind raced. He couldn't allow his fleet to be wiped out completely. He was a commander, and this defeat could never be allowed to reach the rest of the Empire. The Krillians had to regroup to survive. But the human warships were closing in, their massive forms silhouetted against the backdrop of stars. It was clear now that the humans were relentless. There would be no mercy, no quarter. "We cannot retreat any longer," Zorin said, his voice low but resolute. "We have to strike back. We have to show them that we are not finished." The remaining officers looked to him, their expressions mixed with fear and disbelief. A few were injured, some trembling with shock from the violence of the attack. Zorin could see the uncertainty in their eyes, but he refused to let them see his own. He had led the Krillians to victory before, and he wasn't going to let this battle be his last. "Prepare the emergency weapon systems," Zorin ordered. "We will initiate a final offensive. If we are to fall, we will take them with us." There was a moment of hesitation, but the officers moved quickly. The crew began to repair what they could, rerouting power to essential systems and activating the ship's remaining weaponry. Zorin's flagship, though severely damaged, still had some fight left in it. He could see the enemy fleet closing in, human warships that had been adapted to counter everything the Krillians threw at them, but they hadn't seen this coming. As the energy signatures from the human ships flared, Zorin made his final decision. He was not going to go down without a fight. His fleet had underestimated Earth, but he would show them what the Krillians were truly capable of. "Prepare the annihilation charge," he ordered coldly. "We'll send them a message they will never forget." The annihilation charge was the most devastating weapon in the Krillian arsenal, one that could wipe out entire fleets in an instant. However, it came with a massive cost. Once fired, it would disable the flagship's core systems and render the ship incapable of functioning for a long time. But Zorin had no choice. He could not let the humans win without witnessing their defeat firsthand. As the weapon powered up, the bridge hummed with a deep, ominous energy. The crew held their breath, knowing that this was their last chance. Zorin stood at the center of it all, his mind focused on the task ahead. The human ships were getting closer, their weapons aimed directly at his flagship. Time was running out. "Now!" Zorin yelled, his voice shaking with both desperation and resolve. A brilliant, blinding pulse of energy shot out from the flagship, a beam that screamed across space like a harbinger of doom. The Krillian weapon was a streak of pure destruction, and for a moment, Zorin allowed himself to believe that it could work. Perhaps it would turn the tide of battle, force the humans to retreat, or even obliterate their ships. But as the beam shot toward the human fleet, something unexpected happened. The human flagship, which had been at the forefront of the assault, activated a countermeasure, a shimmering energy shield that crackled and pulsed with a strange, almost organic glow. The annihilation charge hit the shield with a violent impact, but rather than obliterating the ship as Zorin had hoped, the beam was absorbed into the energy field. The human warship's shields flared, but they didn't break. Instead, the massive ship retaliated with a devastating return shot. The force of the energy tore into Zorin's flagship, sending the entire vessel into a violent spin. Zorin was thrown to the floor as the ship's systems went into critical overload. The annihilation charge had failed. The human countermeasure had neutralized it with ease. "Abort! Abort!" Zorin's command was cut off as the ship's main power grid exploded, filling the bridge with blinding light. The shockwave rattled his bones, and Zorin knew that this was it. There was no coming back from this. As the flagship began to break apart, its final moments marked by the unstoppable power of the human warships, Zorin could only stare helplessly at the view screen. The human fleet, still intact and unyielding, had proven what he had refused to accept. The Krillians were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. The last thing Zorin saw before the flagship's core went critical, and the lights went out, was the face of the human commander, his eyes cold and unflinching. It was a face that would haunt Zorin's memory forever. Humanity had won. The final stand. Zorin's vision blurred as the entire flagship shuddered violently. The lights flickered, casting the bridge in flashes of red and darkness. The hum of the engines had become a distorted wail, and alarms screamed through the air, signaling the imminent collapse of the ship. The destruction had come too quickly. The once mighty Krillian warship, the pride of Zorin's fleet, was breaking apart piece by piece. Zorin struggled to rise, his legs unsteady as the ship lurched beneath him. His hands gripped the console for support, his mind struggling to comprehend the nightmare unfolding around him. He was a commander, a leader of the greatest empire in the galaxy, and yet here he was, trapped aboard a dying vessel, helpless to stop the inevitable. The enemy had done it. They had crippled his fleet, shattered his defenses, and left him no room to escape. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of his second-in-command, Officer Varnak, who stumbled into view, his face ashen and his uniform torn. "Commander, the ship it's lost. We have to abandon it, now." Zorin's eyes hardened, but the weight of defeat pressed down on him. "Abandon ship," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "You expect me to leave? We fight to the end." Varnak stared at him, desperation in his eyes. "We can't fight anymore, Commander. Their weapons are too powerful. We're completely outmatched. We're all going to die if we stay." Zoran's gaze flicked to the view screen. His flagship, once a symbol of Krillian supremacy, was now little more than a shattered husk floating in the void. Around it, the human warships loomed like titans, immense, unyielding, and merciless. They were slowly closing in, as if savoring the moment. The human fleet, untouched by the chaos that had decimated the Krillian forces, was ready for the final strike. Zoran felt a cold rage rise within him. The humiliation, the sense of his own powerlessness, was unbearable. He had underestimated the humans, and now his entire fleet was on the brink of annihilation. The young commander had been so sure of his victory. He had thought Earth would fall without a fight, that humanity would crumble beneath the might of the Krillian Empire. But the humans had done the unthinkable. They had turned the tables, and now they were about to finish what they had started. But Zoran would not go down without one last attempt to reclaim some measure of control. "Prepare the emergency escape pods," he ordered, his voice cold and determined. "We will not die here in this floating tomb. We will fight on." Varnak nodded reluctantly, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. There was no more hope. He knew it. Zoran knew it. But a part of him refused to accept the crushing reality. The escape pods were ready, but abandoning the ship felt like admitting defeat, something Zoran could never do. Before he could issue another command, the ship groaned again, and the lights flickered out completely, leaving them in an oppressive darkness. Only the glow of the emergency alarms illuminated the room as a deep rumble shook the ship from bow to stern. "Commander, it's over," Varnak said, his voice shaking. "We're done. Please, let's go." Zoran's eyes burned with fury. He would not run. He had led the Krillian fleet to victory in the past. He would not cower before these humans. With one final defiant breath, he looked out toward the view screen. The human fleet was almost upon them now. Their warships were so close that Zoran could see the weapons powering up, the energy beams glowing like the eyes of some ancient predator. His mind raced, trying to think of a way, any way, to make the humans pay for what they had done. There had to be a way to turn the tables, to show them that the Krillians were not so easily crushed. And then, in a moment of clarity, he knew what he had to do. Zoran moved toward the emergency console, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. He keyed in the final sequence of the flagship's self-destruct system. If they were going to lose, they would go down in flames. The humans would not be allowed to take this ship alive. "Activate self-destruct," he muttered, his voice cold with resolve. Varnak's eyes widened. "Commander, no. If we do that, we'll be wiped out, everyone." "It's the only way," Zoran replied, his gaze unwavering. "We won't go down as weaklings. We'll make them remember the cost of defeating us." The countdown began. A low, ominous hum filled the ship as Zoran's final order echoed through the vessel's systems. The countdown clock blinked steadily, the seconds ticking down toward the end of the Krillian fleet's proud history. The human warships were within firing range now. Zoran could feel the heat of their weapons charging, could hear the deep rumble of their cannons preparing to strike. There was no turning back. The flagship was doomed, but so were they all. The humans would learn, in the most devastating way possible, that even in defeat, the Krillians were a force to be reckoned with. A final blast of energy from the human flagship lit up the space around them, and Zoran's ship shuddered violently, its hull cracking under the pressure. The countdown reached its final moments. "Goodbye, Krillian Empire," Zoran whispered, his eyes filled with a mix of pride and regret. And then, with a final resounding explosion, the flagship erupted into a blinding burst of light, taking with it the remnants of Zoran's fleet and the last vestige of his empire. The explosion sent a shockwave through space, sending debris scattering across the void. The final moments of the Krillian fleet had come to a cataclysmic end. In the distance, the human fleet remained unscathed, hovering in the aftermath of the destruction. They had won, but the cost was clear. The Krillians would never forget what humanity had done. As Zoran's ship was consumed by the explosion, the message was clear to all who would hear it. Humanity had proven itself as a force to be reckoned with, one that would never again be underestimated. The Krillian Empire had fallen, and in its place, Earth stood victorious. The aftermath. The shockwave from the destruction of the Krillian flagship rippled through space, sending tremors through the surrounding debris. For a moment, everything was silent. The once mighty Krillian fleet was gone, its remnants scattered like dust in the void. The vast emptiness of space had become the final resting place of an empire that had thought itself untouchable. On the bridge of the human flagship, Commander Elena Matthews stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the screen. The devastation was evident, but the victory was undeniable. The battle for Earth had been won. The human warships, each one a testament to human ingenuity and resilience, had proven their might on the galactic stage. The Krillians, the so-called masters of the galaxy, had been defeated. "Commander," a voice called, breaking the silence. Elena turned to see her second-in-command, Lieutenant Colonel Harris, standing at attention, his face a mixture of exhaustion and pride. "The battle is over. The Krillian fleet is wiped out. Earth is safe." Elena nodded, but there was no sense of triumph in her eyes. The cost of the victory weighed heavily on her. Millions of lives had been lost, both human and alien. The war had taken its toll. Still, she knew there was no turning back now. Earth had stood its ground, and in doing so, it had forever changed the course of history. "We did what we had to do," Elena said quietly, her voice steady. "But the war is over, and we need to remember what we've lost." Harris nodded, his expression somber. "The Krillians won't be coming back, Commander. But the cost of this victory, it's hard to ignore." Elena took a deep breath. She had always known that war, no matter the cause, would leave scars. But this was something new. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The human warships, built with a combination of desperation, ingenuity, and raw determination, had become the new standard. The weapons, the tactics, the sheer power they had unleashed. All of it was proof that humanity had not only survived, but had evolved into something far more dangerous than any of them had realized. As the flagship hovered in the silence, Elena's mind wandered back to the battle, the sheer intensity of it. How quickly the tide had turned when the humans unleashed their devastating energy weapons. How they had taken the Krillians by surprise, shattering their confidence and their fleet in a matter of hours. And yet, even in the face of that destruction, the question still lingered in her mind. What now? "We should start sending the message to the rest of the galaxy," Elena said, her voice filled with resolve. "The Krillians may be gone, but there are other threats out there. We need to make sure the universe knows that Earth is not to be underestimated." The communications officer nodded, already typing in commands to broadcast Earth's victory across the stars. But Elena knew that this wasn't just a message to the Krillians. It was a declaration, a statement that Earth was a force to be reckoned with. The human race had fought back against a foe far superior in power, and they had won. But the victory wasn't just in the destruction of the Krillian fleet. It was in the fact that humanity had stood together when it mattered most. The nations of Earth had come together, pooling their resources, their knowledge, and their bravery to fight a common enemy. They had won not because of their military might, but because of their unity and their unshakable will to survive. The message flashed across the galaxy, broadcast on every frequency that could be reached. Humanity stands strong. The Krillian Empire has fallen. We will never be silenced. We will never be conquered. Across the stars, other civilizations took note of the message. Some would regard it with fear, others with curiosity. But all would recognize the strength of the human spirit. The galaxy had seen humanity as weak, as insignificant, a species that could be easily ignored. But now they knew better. On Earth, Celebrations erupted as the people rejoiced in their hard-earned victory. Cities across the world were alive with the sounds of triumph. For the first time in history, humanity had fought back against a galactic power and had come out victorious. The human race had proven itself as more than just survivors. They had shown the universe that they could overcome impossible odds and rise above. But for Commander Elena Matthews, the celebration felt hollow. She stood on the deck of the flagship, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The Krillian fleet was no more. The invasion had been stopped. But she knew that this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were many who would now see humanity as a threat. There would be new challenges, new enemies, and the human race would have to be ready. But for now, Earth had earned its moment of peace. They had fought for their survival and had proven that humanity would not be erased from the stars. They had faced the impossible, and they had emerged victorious. The galaxy had learned a powerful lesson that day. Humanity, though small in comparison to the vastness of space, had the heart, the courage, and the strength to fight for what was theirs. And from that day forward, Earth would never again be seen as an easy target. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and they would remember it for generations to come. Elena smiled softly to herself. It wasn't just about winning the war. It was about the legacy humanity had built with every step they took toward the future. The fight was over. But the story of humanity's rise had only just begun.